Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at a new devblog for the next major update, and this one is for the Magach Hydra. This is a new medium tank that's coming to Israel in its standard tech tree, which is kind of a surprise to me because this really seems like a premium vehicle or a squadron vehicle, but it is actually coming to the tree at rank 6. It's based off the Magach 6R, which we obviously have a few variants of already, and if you have a look at all of the other Magachs when it comes to Israel, it's kind of nuts. The main thing to note, at least for me when it comes to this thing, is another Magach needed? Not really, other vehicles are kind of needed instead. Does this one offer something unique? I suppose so, but is it something that you actually want? Let's get into the history of this vehicle. In the early 1980s, the Israel Defense Forces began testing a modification of the Magach 6R tank, armed with 2 pods of US-made Hydra unguided rockets mounted on the gun mantlet. This version was built to provide enhanced fire support to infantry formations. The M261 pods were fixed at a slight elevation relative to the zero position of the gun, and were controlled by the tank commander. Data on test results are not available, but the tank was not commissioned for mass production, probably due to the vulnerability of the rocket pods to enemy fire. So I think the main thing to note about this Magach is the fact that it's going to be folded with the Magach 6R. So it's one of those vehicles which is being added, but do you really need to play it? No, not really. It's one of those which is suppose side grade would be a way that some people would put it, compared to a standard vehicle that you can already get access to. And the vehicle itself basically has its issues because of it. And since it's grouped together, it means that you can skip it if you want to get to the next Magach in the line, which I'm sure many people would want to. So what does this vehicle get as a bonus over other ones? You get these Hydra rocket pods. So the Hydra rockets, they have a heat warhead on them, which is really nice. It means that whatever they touch at the level that the Magach's at, you will generally be able to pen and do some damage. What is the issue with them then? Well, because they're not lined up with the gun, instead they're angled above the gun, it means that you cannot get the gun and also the rockets on target at the same time. Now, there are some vehicles in the game, such as like the Levad, for example, or even stuff like the Object 122, where having this kind of backup rocket or missile is really nice, because you can fire the main guns and then you can try and finish off with the rockets or with the missiles in the form of the Object 122, and that's really good. That's not going to happen with this vehicle because the targeting speed or the vertical speed on the gun is too slow, so by the time you've angled and worked out where the rockets need to be, you're going to be reloaded and firing the main gun again. And also at the same time, because they are, set up as at about, I think it's like 500 meters or so, you also have the cross that you have to think about as well, where they're going to, it's kind of like gun convergence on planes, right? Apart from this time, it's a rocket convergence on a tank. So you have all of these issues, which are pretty much going to make this thing kind of unusable in the form for the rockets. So that's the bonus that you get for the vehicle, these rocket pods. What are the negatives? Well, you lose a 50 cal, and I know a lot of people may not think that that's a big deal, but 50 cals are pretty powerful in ground forces. They can knock tracks really easily, some barrels quite easily, and also finish off lighter targets quite easily, especially from the side. Even stuff like Type 16s, for example, can get knocked out by a 50 cal, or even Centauros in some cases. Then you have the fact that you lose all the ERA. So the Blazer ERA is not very good, but this vehicle is at a level, which is at 8.3, where you're starting to climb out of that heat area, but going into the APFSDS area, and having a little bit more chemical protection, especially against heat and heat FS slingers, is pretty nice. And this vehicle has to remove it in order to have these rocket pods. So you have 2 massive downgrades compared to the standard Magach 6s, which this thing has, Plus, the upgrade you have is not going to be very useful in general battles. So, in my opinion, this vehicle is actually worse than the others that are at a similar BR, just because of the simple fact of that. You know, you're taking a base, which the base is okay, I suppose, and then what you're doing is you're adding a gimmick to it and removing some usability. So generally pretty rough. One of the other things as well, since now Israel has so many Magachs, these vehicles are some of the worst to stock grind in the game. No matter what level you're at when it comes to these Magachs, and this was true with the M48 specifically in the American tree, and it got a little bit better with the M60s, but it's still a little bit rough. The vehicles have a really rough stock performance because they don't have their mobility, they don't have all the things that make them strong, like the rounds and all of that, and then you're just going to be left with a slow, massive target in the form of this Magach 6. And it gets grinding onto a point. Like, when the Israeli tech tree came out, I researched through all of the Magachs. I also researched through all the Makavas, just to kind of get them done, and because, to be honest, I'm a big fan of the Makava. I think it's a super fun vehicle. And then they added like 9 Magachs in an update, and I did about half of them, and I was like, you know what, I'm good. Every one of these feels the same. Basically, you start off with the vehicle, it doesn't do very well, it's quite slow, doesn't have too many redeeming factors, maybe apart from survivability because of where the crew's put, but everything else just feels rough. Then you get some of the modifications, such as, you know, the ammunition you need, the mobility ones are huge on vehicles like this, and then you start doing well, and then you start having a bit of fun. And then you unlock the next one, and you do exactly the same thing again. There's no variety with them. Even with just a bunch of Hydra pods, you're never going to use them because of the fact that they're just at this dodgy angle. So what you have effectively here is another Magach without a 50 cal. So worse than the others. So the stock performance will be quite poor. They've decided to give it the M111 round, which means that will be a higher BR. And since you don't get access to the round straight away, it's just going to be a rough experience for you, which just kind of sucks. That's another thing about these Magachs. The difference between them is usually either like a 50 cal or ERA, or the rounds that they get access to, or if they get a stabilizer, or if they get thermals. And it basically just means that every time you get to like the next Magach, you have a new modification to research off the base, and that just makes it a worse experience. So this Magach is coming in at, you know, around about 8.3. That won't be too bad, you know, not as bad as some of the other ones which are around, but still not in a great position. So yeah, it's another Magach. You're going to see more Magachs. Hopefully we can get some light tanks in Israel. Hopefully we get some more SPAAs. That was nice to see more recently. But in the meantime, it's a Magach attack. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Millie Draper, Juan the Panda, Nick R. Kupila, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie B. Young, Peter Grayling, Jerry Provolt, Bareen, Alan Hacker, Sem Arslan, Uncle Bean, Derek R., and Lafouche for supporting the channel.